Assalamu alaikum, greetings of peace. In the name of Allah, most beneficent, most merciful. This video here that we're going to bring you today is going to deal with a subject that I'm sure many of you have come across. It is the subject of whether or not all the peaceful verses of the Quran have been abrogated. Okay? Our position is no, that they have not been abrogated. And we're going to completely and totally prove that the verses, all the peaceful verses of the Quran have not been abrogated. I'm sure many times if you're a Muslim and you've gotten into a discussion with certain people who have an anti-Islamic or anti-Muslim position, and you talk to them about the peace of Islam and you mention certain verses, their response is, oh, well, those verses don't count. All the peaceful verses of the Quran have been abrogated. This is a lie. This is dishonest. It shows that they have not done true research on the subject matter, as we will show you in this video, that there's ample evidence to show that this claim is not true. Okay, and if they have done any type of research, they would have seen that there's plenty of scholars and such that clearly say that this claim of all the peaceful verses being abrogated by chapter 9:5 or some other verse is not accurate. Is an incorrect position to have. So we're going to show that. Okay, we're going to show that in this video.
Okay, point one, we see that there's no verse where Allah says He has replaced or done away with the peaceful verses by any other verse. Okay, so of course the first proof would have to be to show where Allah states that, and there is no place. Point two, in order to prove this point, they would have to show if there is a hadith or narration where Prophet Muhammad taught or said that any verse has replaced or done away with the peaceful verses. And again here, there is no such proof of any such statement or teaching of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So let us examine where this claim comes from and what supposed evidences or proofs are used. Well, when we go to the tafsir of Ibn Kathir on 9:5, he brings a statement from a person by the name of Ad-Dahak bin Muzayhin, who said, it abrogated every agreement of peace between the Prophet and any idolater, every treaty and every term. Notice here, Ad-Dahak does not say where he got this from. He doesn't say the Prophet taught him. He doesn't say the Prophet said. Doesn't say Allah said. So all we can see that this is an opinion of Ad-Dahak. Notice, even here, it does not say it abrogated every verse of peace. All Dahak mentions is some peace agreements and treaties and such. So clearly the context has to be referring to the past treaties that the Prophet Muhammad and the Muslims had made with the pagans of the time period. It can't be referring to all, because he didn't make a peace treaty with all idolaters in every time period. So it's clear that it's his position that it's referring to the peace treaties. It's not saying that it abrogated all the peaceful verses. And also notice that it's not related from Prophet Muhammad. This is the Dahak's own claim either way. The next supposed proof is related here again in Ibn Kathir's tafsir on 9:5. Says Al-Awfi said that Ibn Abbas commented, no idolater had any more treaty or promise of safety ever since Surah Al-Bara'ah was revealed. That's another name for chapter 9. Notice here that also there is no mention of verses being abrogated here either. The reference is to treaties, and clearly past treaties, and no more promises of safety, and it's referring to no more promises of safety for those who made war on the Muslims. So it's clear that there is a game being played here, because neither one of these statements by Ad-Dahak, or that is supposedly said to be a statement of Ibn Abbas, Neither one of them mention anything about verses. It speaks about the treaties that the Muslims had with clearly the pagans of the time period. As you should know, Muhammad he never had a treaty with all non-Muslims. So clearly this can only be referring to the treaties that were had with the pagans of that time period. And in fact, we'll prove that it doesn't include all treaties at any time period into the future and any such thing. We'll show that it only refers to the treaties from the past that were made between the Muslims and the pagans. Now, you may ask yourself, why do we say it referred to those who made war on the Muslims and not all idolaters? Well, the reason is the very next verse, chapter 9, verse 6. It reads, "And if any one of the idolaters seeks your protection, then grant him protection, so that he may hear the word of Allah, and then escort him to where he can be secure. That is because they are men who know not." Now, keep in mind, this is the very next verse after 9:5. So here's how Ibn Kathir gives his interpretation. He says, "Seeks your protection," meaning to ask you for safe passage. Then accept his request until he hears the words of Allah, the Quran. It continues on and says, "And then escort him to where he can be secure and safe until he goes back to his land, his home, and area of safety." Continuing further still, it says, this ayah says, or this verse says, "We legislated giving such people safe passage so that they may learn about the religion of Allah, so that Allah's call will spread among his servants." Ibn Abi Naji narrated that Mujahid said that this ayah, or this verse, refers to someone who comes to you to hear what you say and what was revealed to you. Therefore, he is safe until he comes to you, hears Allah's word, and then proceeds to the safe area where he came from. Notice here, we just read that Ibn Abbas said no idolater had any more promise of safety. Yet here is the very next verse, yet this verse which comes right after 9:5, and is said to legislate giving safe passage to some idolater. So what's going on here? What's going on here? We just read Ibn Abbas said that no promise of safety was given, and yet here we are reading that now the next verse says that yes, safe passage was legislated to some of the idolaters. First point, surely Ibn Kathir didn't forget that he just included a claim from Ibn Abbas about no safety, and then contradict his own writing by now, right after that, including a statement that safe passage was indeed legislated for some idolaters. Point number 2, since it's unlikely that Ibn Kathir would contradict his own writings, it's clear that Ibn Abbas had to be referring to those idolaters who made war on the Muslims, while others were given safe passage, as 9:6 clearly states. There's no way to get around it. See? There's no way to get around it. Now, we understand that this statement is attributed to Ibn Abbas. This is a person who says that Ibn Abbas said this. So if this is accurate, it's unlikely that Ibn Abbas, being one amongst the early Muslims, would make a statement like this and thereby contradict the Quran. So this has to be the context that he's speaking in, because the next verse clearly says that, hey, well, safe passage is given. He said no promise of safety was given. He has to be speaking in the context of no safety was given to, or no promise of safety was given to those who were making war on the Muslims, while others who were not hostile and not attacking and not persecuting the Muslims indeed were allowed a promise of safety, as the next verse clearly says. Point 3, since it's clear that 9:6 does grant safe passage to idolaters not making war on the Muslims, there is no reason to believe that 9:5 abrogated all peaceful verses, since the verse right after it, 9:6, is itself a peaceful verse. Alright? 9:6 itself comes right after 9:5. So if 9:5, by those who make the claim, supposedly abrogated all peaceful verses, well then what about the verse that came right after it, that clearly says that safety and was given to those who are not trying to fight the Muslims, who are not making war on the Muslims. So clearly the claim is obviously a bogus claim, because the verse right after it itself is a peaceful verse. Point 4. Lastly, in all that Ibn Kathir offers of commentary on 9:5, we are left with not one statement from Allah or His Messenger that this verse abrogated all the peaceful verses in the Quran. Ibn Kathir does not offer us any evidence where Allah says the verse abrogated all the peaceful verses. Ibn Kathir does not offer us any evidence where the Prophet is said to say that this verse abrogated all the peaceful verses. All we are given is this statement from Al-Dahak and this statement by Al-Awi, who's saying that Ibn Abbas said something, and even in what they say, it doesn't use the word verses. It speaks of past treaties being abrogated, but not anything about any verses being abrogated. Okay? So again, the most important thing though is that there is no statement where it is proven that Allah has said so, or that the Prophet himself taught or said to anyone that this was the case of this verse abrogating all the peaceful verses. Okay? Therefore, it remains that there is no proof for such a claim. It's just a claim, it's just an opinion, it's speculation, but there's no proof for it. Point 5. If Allah or the Prophet, who had the job of delivering the message of the Quran, did not say it abrogated all peaceful verses, then no one has the right to say that it abrogated all peaceful verses. Who are they as compared to the Prophet? It was the Prophet's job to deliver the message and to explain the Quran. No one else's. We're not obligated to follow anyone else's opinion or interpretation of any verses of the Quran, unless they can show that this is what the Prophet taught them or such. If not, then we're not obligated to follow them. And as you can see, what is shown to us, that there is no statement from Allah, number one, and there's no statement from the Prophet where he said to anyone or taught to anyone that this was the case. So therefore, there's no proof for the claim that it abrogated all the peaceful verses. Okay? So, they have no proof for that claim. Proof would have to be provided with a statement from Allah or the Messenger to support that claim, and there is none. Okay? Everybody understand that. Haters, anti-Islamists, understand there is no proof from Allah or the Prophet for such a claim. Therefore, it is not a valid claim whatsoever. So next, let's move on to what scholars have to say. I'm sure some of you, especially you haters, you might be saying, well, who are you? Who are you, Shadid? Who are you to say that you're not a scholar? Who are you to make this claim? Well, okay, fine. Let's go to the scholars then. Let's see what they have to say. Imam Sayuti, in his book Al-Itkan fi Ulum al-Quran, he says, contrary to what some imams believe, this is not a case of abrogation, but rather of context. In certain situations, the verses of patience and forgiving apply, while in other situations, the verse of the sword applies. By the way, let me make mention here that also, did you know there is no proof that the Prophet, there is no proof, number one, that Allah called this the verse of the sword. There is no proof that the Prophet, peace be upon him, called this verse of the sword, nor the companions, nor his contemporary companions. There is no proof for this name of this verse being called verse of the sword. This is a name that was given later. Again, no legislation from Allah or the Prophet about this. But let me continue. Sayuti says, no verse was completely abolished by another, but rather each has a specific context and applicability. Here we bring another scholar, Imam Zarkashi, in his book Al-Burhan fi Ulum al-Quran. That is the evidence for the sciences of Quran. Right? He says, many commentators, again, these are all their statements about this claim referring to 9:5 abrogating all the peaceful verses. So Imam Zarkashi says, many commentators of the Quran were incorrect in their understanding that the verse of the sword abrogated the various verses of patience and forbearance. This is because abrogation entails a complete termination of a legal ruling, never again to be implemented. This is definitely not the case with these verses. Continuing with Imam Zarkashi's statement, he goes on to say, the verse of the sword by no means abrogated the verses of peace. Rather, each is to be implemented in its appropriate situation. Here we have another Imam, Imam Tabari, in his book Ikhtilaf al-Fuqaha, which means the divergences of the jurist. He says, Imam Tabari criticizes those Muslims who say that chapter 60 verse 8 was later abrogated by another Quranic verse which says, slay the idolaters wherever you find them, chapter 9 verse 5. Tabari goes on and says that the most proper interpretation of verse 60 verse 8 is that God commanded kindness and justice to be shown amongst all the kinds of communities and creeds, and did not specify by his words some communities to the exclusion of others. Tabari goes on and says that here God speaks in general of any group that does not openly fight against the Muslims or drive them out of their homes, and that the opinion that this kindness was abrogated by later Quranic statements makes no sense. Do you hear that? Do you hear that, you people, you haters who keep making this claim? Here we have a scholar saying again that the opinion that this kindness was abrogated by later Quranic statements makes no sense. Imam Tabari. Here we have in a recent book, Ulum al-Quran by Ahmed van Denfer, page 109, he says, still others hold that there are no genuine reports available on this issue, meaning this issue of abrogation, going back to the Prophet. As we said, right, you have to have proof from the Prophet in order to claim that a verse has definitely been abrogated. You need proof. You can't just make a claim based on your assumption, based on your own claim without any proof. The Prophet you have to have some type of definitive evidence for such. And as you see here, there are no genuine reports available that say that. Here also another recent article, Arguments for Abrogation in the Quran, a critique by Dr. Isra Ahmed Khan. He says, the Quran was revealed to the Prophet, peace be upon him. He was also granted by Allah the bayan, the explanation of the Quran. Since he taught the Quran to his followers, he must have given them all that was necessary for them. One does not find any direct statement of the Prophet indicating that any verse of the Quran as practically invalid. So once again, here's another person showing us that, again, there is no evidence of the Prophet claiming that, a particular verse was abrogated or that these peaceful verses were abrogated. I'm not the only one who says this. And here we offer you one more, very strong statement by Muhammad al-Ghazali. He tells us that the allegation that 120 verses on the invitation to Islam were abrogated by the verse of the sword is in fact one of the crassest stupidity, and only serves to show that the great number of Muslims are in a stage of regression of either knowledge or intelligence in our own time, and have become ignorant of the Quran. So again, Brother Shadid is not the one. I'm not making this up. This is not my opinion. I'm not trying to water it down. I'm not trying to appease anybody. I'm not trying to cover up something. We have ample scholars telling us that there is no evidence that goes back to the Prophet for this claim of all peaceful verses being abrogated. Okay? I'm not making this up. It's not my opinion. I'm not trying to hide something. I'm not trying to water it down. I'm not trying to appease Westerners or any of these claims that we hear. These scholars that I mentioned from the past and today, these are not Western people making the claim. Okay? So again, the claim is bogus and there is no evidence for it.
So as you can see, in conclusion, there is, as we mentioned in the video, there is, and first of all, understand that in order for a claim of an abrogated verse to be legitimate, you have to have proof for it. A verse cannot be abrogated based on mere opinion or speculation. In order to prove that a verse is abrogated, number one, you need proof from, of course, Allah himself, where Allah himself says that he has done away with or canceled out or abrogated or replaced a verse with another verse. And as we've seen with these verses, we don't have that. Okay? We don't have any statement where Allah says any verse has been replaced or all the peaceful verses are now abrogated by one particular verse. We don't have that. Second thing is that Muhammad, as Muslims believe, is the messenger, peace be upon him, right? And many Muslims will tell you that it was his job, since he was the messenger to bring the Quran to the people, his job to explain and teach the Quran. So that would be the next proof, would be to show, does he teach that? Does he teach anywhere that a particular verse, or does he teach that all the peaceful verses have now been canceled out, have now been abrogated by 9:5 or any other verse? As we've seen from the proof, the answer is no. Beyond that, really anything else beyond that doesn't matter, because we don't have any statements from anybody else saying that they heard the Prophet teach or heard the Prophet say that all the verses that are peaceful have been canceled or abrogated by 9:5 or any other verse. So beyond that, basically there's no proof for it. It's just mere speculation and opinion. And on top of that, we provided, number one, we provided that proof that nobody can bring a verse. Nobody can bring a verse that says that all the peaceful verses have been abrogated. And again, the verses that mention the idea of something being abrogated, that's just a general statement. Those are not haters. Those verses are not proof that all the peaceful verses have been abrogated. Okay? That just talks about the idea of Allah abrogating or replacing or doing away with some previous things before. But it doesn't mention any specific verses. So that's not an argument. Many people attempt to bring that verse and say, oh yeah, look right here. And I'm like, well, but this verse doesn't say that any particular verse has been abrogated. It just speaks of the idea of abrogation. And as we've talked in our other videos, that is referring to the Quran abrogating the previous scriptures. But that verse, those two verses that most people bring, nowhere does it say in those verses that a particular verse or particular verses have been abrogated. So that's not a proof, okay? We're not asking you to show us where the idea is spoken of. We're asking you to show us where directly it says it. Where does it directly say this verse has been abrogated by this verse? Where does Allah say it? Where does the Prophet say it? The answer is nowhere. Nowhere do we see such proofs. Okay, you can check all the scholars on it. They don't offer any verses about it. Okay, you can check the hadith on it. There's no hadith from the Prophet that says that Allah said or that Muhammad said that all the verses have been abrogated or any such idea. So there's no proof from that. And then on top of that, we have again scholars of Quran, scholars of interpretation of Quran. Many of them, as I gave in the video, clearly showing that this position, that the peaceful verses have been abrogated, is an incorrect position. So they have the evidence on their side, because again, there is no statement from Allah or the Prophet that such a claim holds true. So those scholars that hold the position that the peaceful verses have not been abrogated, they have the evidence in their favor, and those who claim otherwise do not have any support for their claim, as they can't reference any verse from Allah or any statement from the Prophet, peace be upon him. So from here on, I hope that as this video spreads and the information gets out, that less and less people who are attempting to demonize Islam will use this argument as the evidence does not allow for it. And hopefully those Muslims who get involved in discussions as such, you can use this and the proofs and evidences from this video to argue against and refute those who make such a claim. All right, thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Yes, keep a lookout for our up-and-coming DVD entitled Misquoting the Quran, where we expose and refute the claims of those who try to distort and misquote the Quran in order to try to demonize the religion of Islam. So we will do that in this DVD, and there will be a special section where we go further in details on this subject matter of this video, which is about the claim that all the peaceful verses of the Quran have been abrogated. So we'll go into further details in our DVD. So keep a lookout for it. It will be available on Amazon.com and on our website. Thank you.
to them about the peace of Islam and you mention certain verses, their response is, oh, well, those verses don't count. All the peaceful verses of the Quran have been abrogated. This is a lie. This is dishonest. It shows that they have not done true research on the subject matter, as we will show you in this video, that there's ample evidence to show that this claim is not true. Okay? And if they have done any type of research, they would have seen that there's plenty of scholars and such that clearly say that this claim of all the peaceful verses being abrogated by chapter 9:5 or some other verse is not accurate. Is an incorrect position to have. So we're going to show that. Okay? We're going to show that in this video.
Okay, point one, we see that, so let us examine where this claim comes from and what supposed evidences or proofs are used. Well, when we go to the tafsir of Ibn Kathir on 9:5, he brings a statement from a person by the name of Ad-Dahak bin Muzayhin, who said, it abrogated every agreement of peace between the Prophet and any idolater, every treaty and every term. Notice here, Ad-Dahak does not say where he got this from. He doesn't say the Prophet taught him. He doesn't say the Prophet said. Doesn't say Allah said. So all we can see that this is an opinion of Ad-Dahak. There's no verse where Allah says He has replaced or done away with the peaceful verses by any other verse. Okay. So of course, the first proof would have to be to show where Allah states that, and there is no place. Point two, in order to prove this point, they would have to show if there is a hadith or narration where Prophet Muhammad taught or said that any verse has replaced or done away with the peaceful verses. And again here, there is no such proof of any such statement or teaching of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
Assalamu alaikum, greetings of peace. In the name of Allah, most beneficent, most merciful. This video here that we're going to bring you today is going to deal with a subject that I'm sure many of you have come across. It is the subject of whether or not all the peaceful verses of the Quran have been abrogated. Okay? Our position is no, that they have not been abrogated. And we're going to completely and totally prove that the verses, all the peaceful verses of the Quran have not been abrogated. I'm sure many times if you're a Muslim and you've gotten into a discussion with certain people who have an anti-Islamic or anti-Muslim position, and you talk.
Notice, even here, it does not say it abrogated every verse of peace. All Dahak mentions is some peace agreements and treaties and such. So clearly the context has to be referring to the past treaties that the Prophet Muhammad and the Muslims had made with the pagans of the time period. It can't be referring to all, because he didn't make a peace treaty with all idolaters in every time period. So it's clear that it's his position that it's referring to the peace treaties. It's not saying that it abrogated all the peaceful verses. And also notice that it's not related from Prophet Muhammad. This is Dahak's own claim either way. The next supposed proof is related here again in Ibn Kathir's tafsir on 9:5. Says Al-Awfi